Hi, this is Carrie Cheadle and I am bringing you your Mental Skills Minute during the 2011 Tour de France, and today's topic is about suffering and the psychology of suffering. So when you see those guys out there, sometimes you might think, how is it possible for them to be able to sustain that kind of effort, especially those sprinters? How do you push yourself that hard? And sometimes it does come down to, who is able to tolerate suffering the most, whoever is on the podium. It might come down to that piece. So some tips for how do I, sometimes we get to the end of the race and we kind of feel like maybe that you could have pushed yourself a little bit harder. So what you're thinking during those times when you're really putting out a really big effort, so you're chasing down a break, or it's during a time trial, or you're trying to catch back up into the pack, when you're putting out a ton of effort, what you're thinking is just as important during that time as your hydration and your training and your fueling. All of that stuff comes into play. So some tips for how can I work on the psychological aspects of suffering when it comes to that piece, because that's a huge factor when it comes to our ability to tolerate pain. So one of the first things you can do that helps with being able to push yourself harder than you think is to make sure that you have a specific goal. So have a specific goal. When you have that specific goal, you're going to push yourself harder during those moments where it really starts to hurt, where you really do start to suffer and feel that the pain of the exertion that you're putting out. So say it's one thing to say, if your goal is to finish a race, that's more of a general goal. But if you say, my goal is to finish with the pack, when you start to fall off the back of the pack, you're going to push yourself a lot harder during that moment because your goal is to finish with the pack. So when you have a specific goal, you're going to push yourself a little bit harder than if you just have a general goal of finishing that race. So another tip is going to be to know where your focus is going to be ahead of time during that time when you know you're going to be suffering, right? So kind of knowing ahead of time, when are those times that I'm going to experience that kind of big effort, and where does my focus need to be in that time? Because as soon as you start thinking about the pain, all of a sudden you start to feel the pain even more, right? So knowing where you're going to focus during that time, where does your focus need to be sort of externally, so that you can get through that time successfully. So shifting that when you're internal with your focus and you're thinking about how much pain you're in, you're just going to feel it that much more. So you're thinking about smooth pedal strokes, you're thinking about your breathing. What are you going to focus on in order to get through that moment? And the last piece is your perception of the pain, and you might need to shift or reframe that perception. So when we label that pain as something that's bad, we have a reaction to that label, and we make decisions based on that label. So you might need to shift your perception of what it means for your body to be going through that kind of pain. And the ways to do that is, one way you can do that is just to tell yourself that there's a finite end to that pain. So you might be saying to yourself, 2 minutes, I could do anything for 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. So you're not thinking about how much pain you're in, you're thinking about that the pain that you're experiencing right now is going to get you to that finish line. So what you're thinking is just as important as the rest of your plan for being able to put out really, really big efforts. Your training comes into play, your hydration comes into play, your fueling comes into play, your recovery comes into play, and so does your mental game. It's just another piece of the puzzle that gives you an edge over your competitors and brings together that whole package of you as an athlete, right? So have a specific goal. Know where your focus is going to be and shift that perception of your experience of pain in order to push yourself even harder than you thought. Thanks for tuning into this Mental Skills Minute.